And good evening from Philadelphia. Frank here with another episode of UFO News Network Sunday. Tonight on a Monday night. Yeah, it's Monday night. That's right. It's Monday night. And we are ready to go. Kind of an unusual show tonight. We don't have a guest, which is kind of unusual, but we've got a little bit of a presentation for you about what's been going on the last couple of weeks. And let me get everything started here with my co-host, as always, Chant Hannah. Chant, how are you?
I'm doing really well. Thank you so much for asking. How are you doing, Frank?
Doing good. We're ready to get started. Of course, we've got some more information on these very exciting Admiral Wilson documents that has everybody believing that they are legitimate and not disinformation. Well, everybody but us, of course. We've been digging in, and basically what we're going to try to do is, for some folks playing a little bit of catch-up, we're going to go in a little bit of chronological order here and go back to an interview that Chant and I had with Michael Hall, who is the lawyer for Grant Cameron, who had hold of these documents. And what we're going to do is we're going to play a little video from that. And let's go back in time to March 26th. It was 3 months ago, Wednesday. 3 months ago Wednesday, when we talked to Michael Hall. And what I did at that point in time is I had a little bit of a presentation, a little bit of a warning for him to give him a heads up in terms of what to look out for in terms of disinformation. And this is going to run about, I think, about 8 minutes or so. So, Chant, you and I will have to be quiet on our end. But I want the folks to hear at home that that particular interview did not get quite as many views as our second interview with Michael. So he may not have heard it and may not have heard my warning for both Grant and Michael regarding these documents and putting too much stock in them. So let's go to that now.
People who are still alive.
Okay. Now. I guess now is the time where I get to play Wet Blanket and say, if it sounds too good to be true, it probably is. Okay. So, when I first got involved in all this, the Majestic 12 documents were a pretty good research tool for me, and it led me to look at things like the documentation on the Truman at the Truman Library, and it was very helpful to me. But by the same token, I don't believe that they are in fact true. Now I've got one of the more famous Majestic 12 documents up here now. Folks can look at it. I would say that these documents are, to a large extent, pretty well researched. I believe it's been pretty well established by maybe some of the more skeptical researchers that these documents are not legitimate, that they were put together by FOSI, the Air Force Office of Special Investigations, which has in fact over the years led a number of UFO researchers astray with this type of bogus information. But this is one of the more famous documents we've got up now with a little bit of additional information kind of photoshopped towards the bottom. But this document here that I've got up is basically Truman's ordering that the Majestic 12 operation begins, and it's started with James Forrestal and Vannevar Bush on a date September 24th, 1947. A quick perusal of the president's calendar at the Truman website reveals that, in fact, he did meet on that particular day with James Forrestal and Vannevar Bush in probably the Oval Office. He met with them somewhere in the White House, but he did meet with those two gentlemen. And I certainly don't think that proves that this is a legitimate document, but what it proves is it was a fairly well-researched document. I don't think there's any question about that. They put some time and they put some effort, and when the original Majestic 12 documents were released on a piece of microfilm sent to a film producer by the name of Jamie Chandere, this was back in the 1980s, so this predates the internet, obviously, and the Truman Library online archives. So whoever picked up this information and tied this particular date and these particular individuals, Vannevar Bush and then Secretary of Defense James Forrestal, to this meeting, did some research. They did one of two things. They either, almost certainly, either went to the Truman Library directly and went through the archives and looked at the president's calendar and said, oh my goodness, this looks like an interesting date to tie this particular bogus document to. Or they hired a researcher for hire who went to the Truman Library. That sort of thing is available. You could hire a local researcher who will go to the Truman Library and give them some information like, I want everything on James Forrestal, and they'll dig that up for you and get it back to you. So one of those two things did happen. Certainly the Air Force does in fact have the resources to get an intelligence officer to the Truman Library and go in there and dig some stuff out. But it might have been done the other way. But either or, that's what I think would happen there. But this is the type of thing that you're often looking at with some of these bogus documents, where they do actually tie the bogus to something that absolutely did in fact happen. So that's that document. Another interesting document is in the Majestic 12 archives, and unfortunately, that is not available. Very early on, there was a website that had all of them in there, and they were on PDFs, and you could download them. That website, unfortunately, no longer exists. But it did at one point, and I was able to grab a few of the PDFs. This is another Majestic 12 document that I think is especially interesting. Approved by Harry Truman, goes into needs to know and what was discovered from the Roswell crash and so on and so forth. Again, I note the date towards the top of the page, September 1947. And on page 14 of that particular document, a number of organizations have, based on all available evidence collected from recovered exhibits currently under study, and it goes on to list a number of organizations, NACA, which was the precursor to NASA. Another one that's listed, which I think is particularly interesting, in the second spot after the NACA, is RAND, which is short for RAND Corporation. The red flag here is, again, let's go back to that original date, September 19th, 1947, and RAND, of course, referring to the RAND Corporation, which has had some involvement with UFOs over the years. The RAND Corporation was not founded until the following year, the middle part of 1948. So that is a strong indicator that that particular document is, again, bogus. Now, and also here, we've got, Michael had mentioned Stephen Greer. His most recent film was a film called Unacknowledged, where one of his major hooks in terms of getting the film promoted and sold was a purported document tying the death of Marilyn Monroe to her knowledge about UFOs, that in fact she was murdered because she knew too much about UFOs. This document is also bogus. I've got that from Paul Dean directly. We discussed that, and I'm very confident in his expertise on this particular matter. And also, there is the Serpo material, which is floated around. And let me jump ahead here, because I'm going to get to another piece that's over in the Serpo material. Serpo.org is a website that still exists, and you can go to it, serpo.org, read all the Serpo material there. Very entertaining. I enjoy reading the stuff. I think I read through just about all of it way back in the day. Haven't looked at it for a while, but one of the things that's outlined in the Serpo material relates to a direct contact between extraterrestrials, the EBINs as they're referred to in the Serpo material, and the United States Air Force. And what they do here is discuss a landing. The Air Force had received messages from the EBINs in December of '63 that the following year they'd make some kind of direct contact. And it mentions a couple paragraphs below, and I'll read this verbatim. The first EBIN craft entered our atmosphere during the afternoon of April 24th, 1964. The EBIN craft landed at the wrong location near Socorro, New Mexico. Again, this is attempting to tie this material to a known incident. And what happened on April 24th, 1964, near Socorro, New Mexico, was, of course, the Lonnie Zamora case. And think what you like about that particular case. I don't know anybody who is seriously putting forth that Mr. Zamora saw a UFO. In fact, I'm of the opinion that what he witnessed was a balloon launch by some local college students from the New Mexico Institute of Mining and Technology. So again, this is kind of an Afosi trick. This is something that they do on a regular basis, trying to tie made-up facts within their fantasy writings to real events that we know did happen. And finally, and this is the one where I do express some legitimate concern to both Michael and to Grant before putting too much stock in this material. Of course, I wish them the best. I hope they come a cropper with this and they hit the jackpot. But this is another document that is in the Serpo material release 27A, and this is a transcript, a lengthy transcript of an alleged meeting between the then President Ronald Reagan and an individual who apparently is referred to in the conversation as the caretaker, but basically he is the person who keeps all the UFO secrets, and he is briefing Ronald Reagan about all this. And again, it's release 27A. You can go ahead and you can read all through it. And like I say, I think it's a very entertaining fiction, but this briefing never did take place. I did take a look at Reagan's schedule, and on the date, let's see, the recording was made March 6th and 8th, 1981. And in fact, I did look at Reagan's schedule. He was at Camp David at that particular point. Again, a good bit of research was done on it, but so this briefing is tied to a definitive event. He was at Camp David on those dates, but again, if you read through it, I think it's obviously it was written. Obviously, as at least to my eyes, the way I read it, it was something that was written as compared to a transcript of an actual conversation. It just doesn't read like any kind of conversation any normal person would have, and that would include President Ronald Reagan and William Casey and Michael Deaver and some of the other individuals who are purportedly at this meeting. So there you go. I'm off my soapbox now, Michael, and take it away. What do you think about all that? I'm highly skeptical of this document that Grant says he's got. Well, I'm sure he's got it, but I'm highly skeptical of the document.
Yeah. Well, Frank, this is why I call you and Chant the Bonnie and Clyde of paranormal radio. You guys get down to the bottom line. You don't take any crap from anyone.
Michael, I haven't looked at a lot of this material in almost 10 years now. It's been a long time since I dug through this stuff, so I really had to refresh my memory, let me tell you. Okay, and that is that. That's what we warned Michael and Grant about. And of course, what we saw when that doc was released was a lot of those plot devices, a lot of those little tricks of the trade that has been used in terms of developing misinformation. And what we want to do is really get into it. I can tell you the smoking gun, if you want to use that term, the smoking gun for me was, of course, when I saw that in the letter, or in the notes that Commander Will Miller asked regarding a series of different questions that he had for this gatekeeper group, this watch committee that supposedly was informing Admiral Wilson. And let's see if I have that in what order here. Let's see. I don't have that here, so let's we're getting ahead of ourselves. But basically, it's listed that Miller asked about the Roswell case, Rendlesham case, a couple other cases, but also about the Holloman case, which is the Holloman Air Force Base case where supposedly ET had a meetup with the Air Force, and the Socorro case, because in the Serpo material, as you saw if you watched the earlier video, that meetup supposedly happened on the day of the Lonnie Zamora sighting. And again, that was the real red flag. And as soon as I saw that, I said, I'm convinced that this is likely disinformation, and was definitely going to follow up with it. From there, I contacted Commander Miller. I was able to get hold of his contact information and spoke with him on the following Monday after this document came out, and asked him two questions. I didn't have a whole lot of time because I had to leave the house, but the two questions I had for him were basically, did he remember writing the letter to Eric Davis? And he said he wasn't sure, he didn't know, and obviously that's to be expected. But one thing that somebody remembers, I mean, if you're into UFOs and nobody questions that Commander Miller is interested in UFOs, he thinks there's really something to the subject, and that the one thing that you remember is what are your favorite cases? What are the top cases in your mind? The same way a normal person, a non-UFO buff, might always remember their favorite movie or their favorite musicians or their favorite sport teams or whatever. They're going to remember that. And when Commander Miller asked me, what's the Socorro case? I believed him. I believed that. Okay. That's what I believed. That's what convinced me that there was some serious issues with this documentation. So from there, we've got, let's see, we've also got a little segment involving the reasoning why ostensibly, Admiral Wilson was in Vegas in the first place. And basically, what he says is he came to a special area to do some follow-up work that his successor in his position with the NSA, or excuse me, with the DIA, was not really following up. He didn't really care about it. That would be Jacoby. And the trip was set up by NNSA members, Rich and Doug. Eric Davis, know them. AFIO members told about how new Las Vegas chapter needed guest speakers for chapter, public venue, raise money, membership, etc. Now, it doesn't say specifically that that was part of the reason he was coming out there. Yeah, but they set up his trip to the National Nuclear Security Agency and to do that work. And he's there anyway, and it's a brand new chapter. And that is a fact. It is a new chapter. There was a new chapter in October 2002 when this meeting allegedly took place. But there is literally no record of Admiral Wilson being there. And on the last show, we did mention that we went back into the Periscope, which is the newsletter for AFIO. And Chant, go ahead. What do you want? Oh, okay. All right. Well, yeah. Let me go through what I got, and then you can follow up because you did some additional follow up on this. But again, in this Periscope newsletter, it does mention that the Vegas chapter is brand new. In October 2002, they did have their inaugural meeting, and you would think that maybe if Admiral Wilson had spoken at this meeting, it would have been a pretty good inaugural guest, and they would have mentioned the fact that he had been there and spoke to them at their very first meeting. But again, no mention at all there of that. And then finally, Chant, let's see, where are we at now? Okay, this is again tying back to the Serpo material where the president meets at Camp David with the caretaker, and then of course from the notes, the Admiral Wilson was able to meet with the gatekeepers, the watch committee. Nobody named, just. They give themselves these silly names to add drama to the fictional narrative. So there's that. Let's call back to that. And Chant, you were able to get an official on the record quote. I'm sorry. Could you run that by me again? It doesn't say that. It doesn't say that specifically, but the implication is clearly that one of the things he intends to do during this trip is to handle his business with the NDDS. Obviously, meet with Eric Davis. I don't think that is at the top of that list. And also, since he's in the neighborhood anyway, and these guys from AFIO set up the trip, that there's a little quid pro quo going on, and that Wilson would help them kickstart their new chapter.
I contacted a person who has been a member of the Association of Former Intelligence Officers for decades in Las Vegas. And he went ahead, and I've actually spoken to him twice, and he sent me an email stating this: I am a charter member of the Las Vegas chapter of AFIO and have served as an officer continuously. I can state without equivocation that at no time in any year did we have Admiral Wilson as a speaker, that he had any part in starting the chapter is patently false.
So this is the real problem for the pro-dox people, okay? You have to prove that Wilson was in Vegas on the date in question. If you don't have that, these docs are absolutely fake. And, going into it, I thought they're well-researched enough. There was a very reasonable chance that it might turn out that, in fact, he was in Vegas on that particular date. But it's starting to look more and more and more as if he was not. So this is a serious problem for the pro-dox folks. The folks are saying this is going to be very difficult to debunk. Well, so far it hasn't proved that difficult at all. Maybe to prove thoroughly and completely that it's a fake, but we're gathering lots of evidence to really knock this material down. And the pro-dox folks are really coming out with nothing, and I mean nothing, other than the docs themselves to claim that it's real. There's no additional evidence to prove that it's real. And in fact, the docs themselves sort of self-destruct when you take a closer look at them. So there's that. But there's more. There's more. So what else do we have, Chant?
Did you feel like going on to the alien autopsy memo to go over that a little bit?
Absolutely. I've got that up now. Okay, so I think you have some notes on pages 4, 6, 9, and 10. So why don't you start with page 4?
Yes.
If folks want to follow along at home, they can.
And what I'm going to do right now for the folks is I'm going to grab a link to that actual document so people aren't just like wondering, what are we talking about? So they can actually follow along. So there's the link regarding the document that we are about to talk about, and that is called colloquially as the Alien Autopsy Memo. Now, these documents, in my view, are faked. I will share some opinions, points, and evidence. Now, I'm going to call the Alien Autopsy Memo AAM. So when I say that acronym, AAM, I'm talking about the Alien Autopsy Memo. Okay, 1. Again, I will share opinions, points, and evidence. So you will hear a mixture of that when I'm talking. 1. A scientist of Kit Grain's magnitude, I believe, does not use the word nope, N-O-P-E, on page 6.
Oh, you're on page 6 now? Okay, let me move to that.
Yep.
On page 4.
6.
Okay. Sorry about that.
And I believe would not use all caps either when referring to anything amongst all of his peers at any time, whether it be a memo or email, any kind of communication, maybe in jest, but I don't believe that that person would use screaming caps throughout an entire memo, document, or a series of emails, or an email, or any kind of communication to peers at a professional level. 2, if you go to page 6, terms used like ruga, R-U-G-A, when they're talking about the brain, and that part of the document. The term used called ruga is incorrect for describing brain folds. Rugae are ridges, folds around the folds found in the stomach, digestive systems that allow for expansion. The sulcus are the folds seen on the brain. Dr. Green would have been more precise about this, and he would have known this kind of information. So the term used like rugae, it seems to me that he would have had the knowledge base to definitely not have used a term like this medical term, in an incorrect manner. Number 3, on page 9, emails from Kit, Hal, and John show that in January 7th, 2001, they all have a Singapore located in the email address. Now, I've already confirmed from John Alexander himself that he not only did not work for General Motors, he never worked for General Motors, and he never ever worked in Singapore. Also, Hal, from my research, I have discovered, and I believe it to be correct, never worked for General Motors and never worked in Singapore. That is located on page 9. So already we know it is a fact that John B. Alexander, who is referenced in this alien autopsy doc, or memo rather, with a @gm.com.sg email address, he never ever once worked for General Motors, and he never ever worked in Singapore. Now on page 10, there's an email showing it at a gmr.com. In looking at Kristen Zimmerman email, we see a US_GM_WRN_TC101 at notes.gmr.com. Now, an individual who I spoke with told me that he knows from working in the Army that this could be referring to TACOM, TACOM, which is an Army Tank Automotive and Armaments Command, Warren, meaning Warren, Michigan. So the U.S. Army TACOM AMSTA-CSP, this is their address, 6501 East 11 Mile Road, Warren, Michigan, 48397-5000. And this is where he said we make our tracked vehicles. General Motors is also located in Michigan. Anyone working in the IT world knows that syntax for mail domains are very specific and consistent for organizations, he said. So I'm going to read that again because that's extremely important. On page 10, there's an email now showing it at agmr.com. In looking at Kristen Zimmerman's email, we see a US_GM_WRN_TC101 at notes.gmr.com. He said, I do know from working here in the Army that this could be referring to TACOM, TACOM, in Warren. Again, Warren, Michigan. And he said, this is where we make our tracked vehicles. General Motors is also located in Michigan. Anyone working in the IT world knows that syntax for mail domains, mail, M-A-I-L, domains are very specific and consistent for organizations. We see kit_green at gmrnotes3.gmr.com, comma, kit_green at gmr.com, comma, kit.green@gm.com.sg. Just so everybody is aware, Kit Green, from the research that I have been able to locate through the help of another well-known researcher, and this was this is really important that everybody knows this. And this actually, let me restate that again. The individual that gave me the information that he did not work in Singapore, which was John Alexander, he told me that Kit Green was the VP for General Motors in Singapore. So that part of the email address for that person in this memo is correct. But for Hal and for John Alexander, that same email address is not. Now, going to page 4, Kit Green /US/GM/GMC at GM, that's missing a .com. Why did nobody notice this? It's right in front of all of us. See, this is the thing, Frank. Everybody is taking all of these documents as though they are completely real without looking at the obvious aspects that are staring at us right in our face. All we have to do is stare at this document and scrutinize it a little bit harder, and you will see some strange anomalies, such as on page 4, the Kit Green /US/GM/GMC@GM is missing a .com. Now, I have tried to email people without the .com. It has never worked. It never will work, and that just will not happen for anybody.
You'll get an invalid email address error message.
Exactly. So either somebody forgot to copy and paste the rest of that, or it's unknown. But I can tell you this, the email that came out of that particular part of the document on page 4, where you can see an email underneath it, there's no way that email actually could have gone through correctly. Because of that .com part missing for that individual, at least. Now, the last email, Sedge Masters, does not have the correct email construct. There are 2 twos. So we'll look into that in just a moment. When we say 2 twos, there's TO twice. So I'll look at that in just a moment. Now, Kit is calling Hal on page 10, Halbert. Just so everybody is aware, I'm going to read that again. On page 10, let's look at that. It's right in front of us. Kit is calling Hal Halbert. Now, why would anybody who has known Hal for years call Hal Halbert when Hal Putoff's name is not Halbert? It is Harold. Okay, so that is very odd to me, and I know that this might sound a little redundant, but it's really important for people to understand that there are people who are shopping around this memo as though it is authentic. Now, it doesn't really matter, does it, who is saying it is this document is authentic, if we are pointing out here all of the research we've done to indicate not only proof that somebody did not work in Singapore for General Motors, but that another individual in the document didn't either, and people can go do their due diligence to check on that and ask Hal about that if they wish. But why would Kit call Hal Halbert when that's not his name? Now, wanted to ask you, Frank, just a question. Why do you not take documents like this at face value? And I have a part 2 to that I would like to add. I want to tell the whole UFO community something that's really interesting I've noticed. And that is, people have been saying repeatedly that there's famous talk show hosts and iconic people in the realm of ufology that are stating this document and the other document known as the Smoking Gun Doc are authentic, so it must be real. Well, that's not enough. You know,
No.
You can be an excellent researcher and put your name behind something, but that does not mean I'm going to believe you. You know why? Because I have to do my due diligence and my own research to systematically tear a document apart bit by bit to make sure every single part of it actually adds up. And that's the thing, Frank. This document, this AAM document, does not add up. So, why do people blindly believe iconic people in the UFO community and famous talk show hosts because they say, this is real, deal with it? why is that enough for people? Why don't they bother to actually do research like we did?
Well, the will to believe is very, very strong. Some folks who've been around this UFO business for a while will remember the Roswell slides, the purported picture of a dead alien. And I know some people who were involved in that. A good friend of mine, Tony Bergalia, he was involved in that heavily, and he believed. I mean, the circumstances were a lot different. It wasn't a document, but it was a photograph of what proved to be a dead mummy that had been around a while. It looked kind of vaguely alien, and there's no question about it. It's a startling, stunning image. But, you know, the will to believe is strong, and I'm convinced a lot of people kept calling that fraud and fake and all that. As it turned out, I think they made a mistake. I do believe that the researchers involved with that, especially Tony, they believed that they had something. They really did. And I think Grant really believed that he had something. But, you know, he should have asked around a little bit more. I mean, Michael certainly knew the things that without even seeing these documents, especially, well, the smoking gun document in particular, that's the one that he pointed out. But without even seeing these documents, and he should have known that some of the red flags that I was raising should have been a concern. But, you know, that will to believe is very, very strong, very, very strong. So there's that. And also the will to either ignore or misrepresent research that demonstrates something that is pro-UFO is also very, very strong. Again, I dealt with that involving the Socorro case. So, you know, there's that as well. It's a funny thing, but all you can really do is keep following the leads, keep following the research, and, you know, the truth will maybe not always out in the end, but we're finding out more. And this hasn't been difficult for debunkers to discredit. You know, I don't even know that any quote unquote debunkers have tried to discredit it. I don't know if they've even bothered. But, you know, when you get a couple of researchers who, you know, have been doing this for a little while on this and looking at this a little bit more critically, then it was pretty easy to at least raise serious concerns. I mean, you know, when I spoke to Michael when we had him on the show, I guess it's been going on 3 weeks now. It'll be 3 weeks this week. You know, they got to show something. They've got to show something more than the facts of the docs. They've got to, you know, place Admiral Wilson in Vegas, which we've raised doubts about. They've got to do a lot of other things before running around saying that this is the leak of the century. And, you know, are you kidding me when we make contact with Admiral Wilson and then misrepresent the contents of that exchange and then, you know, deal with it. And, of course, we don't know what we're talking about. Well, I think that we do, and I think we've demonstrated that over the last roughly 40 minutes or so. But there's more. We're not done yet.
Okay, just one last thing, I might bring up something later on in the talk, but on page 11 in this AAM document, alleged document, I wanted to bring up something interesting that I was hoping people out there who are like ourselves and like to do research and do their own due diligence, if you look at the email header on page 11, I'm reaching out to anybody out there that's willing to do some research on this. I know I will. Hopefully they'll find out some interesting information. That is, it says from putoff@aol.com on 8/01/99, 11/19/42 p.m. Then we move on to the two-part Kit Green and another email address. Then we move on to where it says date. Saturday, 31 July 1999, 13/18/24 EDT. Do you remember this part, Frank?
Yeah, what page is that on again?
That's on page 11.
11. Okay.
Remember when we went over this?
Let me load this up because I don't have page 11 in there. I don't believe.
Yeah, and okay, so I'll just read the rest of it.
Yeah, let me add page 11 to the screenshot. It's not.
Sure.
I don't know how well the folks can read it, but, you know, if you're following along that closely, you should have been able to, you know.
All right. But
get home, do some research on your own and figure out where these links are. What can I say?
Right, yeah.
Okay.
So
Now hang on
anyway,
a sec. Let's get to.
now maybe you can even, if you feel like you have the time, Frank, to just do a screenshot of only that part where you were just at on page 11. Just cut that page in half and slip that into the slideshow so that people can see it closer.
There's page
And
11.
page 11. And
the print is kind of small where I'm looking.
is it? Yeah. If you feel like you can cut that in half and do a screenshot of page 11 on the bottom part.
I've got a few things to do, but people can check it out on their own.
Sure. Okay. So anyway, maybe you can also,
This is
Frank,
page 11 of the alien autopsy series of emails and memoranda.
Right.
And all that.
So, Frank, are you there? Because I wanted to show you something.
Hang on a sec. I don't know if I've got it because the screens I have to look at are a bit small.
Okay, so let me just go ahead and
Page
make
11.
sure that you have.
Let me do it this way.
There's the link right there for you. I just sent it to you. And while he's looking for that, I'm just going to mention something while he's looking. Moving along to the same area, it says, Kit and Kristen, just wanted to check. Didn't I send you a package of UFO mag articles by pseudonym? How do you say that? Pseudonymous. I've never even heard that word
or something.
Okay, sure. That's an odd word.
Okay, that is the short page. Okay, that's the last page, 11.
Okay, yeah, so you're there then, right?
Yep, looks that way.
So at the so I'll start at the top here. It says from put off at AOL.com on 8/1/99/11/19 p.m. You see that, right, Frank?
I cannot read it. The print is too small. But
Okay,
I'm on page 11.
Okay, and then so that would be at. Okay, well anyway, it says it below. It says where it says I destroyed the papers. It's below that, and then it says to Kit Green, and then another email address. Then it says date. Then it says Saturday or Sat, 31 Jul for July 1999 13/18/24 EDT. Do you remember when we were talking about this with that famous researcher that I cannot name right now?
Yep.
About how anomalous this was?
Yep.
In other words, it shows two different time styles.
Mm-hmm.
It shows a time style of military time, and then the other one is just a PM, an AM PM time.
Right.
I would like to see if anybody can find out if that seems like that's possible for an email header to have a date where it says an actual word date, and then that kind of time and date stamp.
I think
where
that
the other one doesn't.
Yeah, I think that kind of thing might be possible.
We'll find out, because what I'm going to do is
the reason I say this. Let me go into the reason I say this, because in Europe, for example, like we express dates. Today is October 24th, for example. So we will put down 10/24. But folks in other countries will put the day first and then the month. So it'll be 24/10. They'll do it that way. So if somebody's on a is using a 24-hour clock, maybe in the military, I think that's possible. That may or may not be something.
I'm gonna find out. Now, I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that. I'm just saying that it looks rather anomalous to me, because I've never seen it before, but it doesn't mean just because I haven't seen it before that it's not possible. I just find it odd that in an email header there is a military set of time there, and then in the same email header that there is an AM PM style of time. Now, moving along underneath that email header, it says Kit, Kristen, just wanted to check, didn't I send you a package of UFO mag articles by a pseudonymous author, Sedge Masters, concerning crashed / retrievals by a group called Zodiac? If so, still hoping for a readout by you on this, as we have reason to believe the set of stories, 3 I think, are only slightly fictionalized versions of a source's experiences writing up records for the archives at WPAFB. Specifically, ever heard of Zodiac, which is supposed to be the true name? Second question. Colm once mentioned that you had seen real autopsy records. Are you holding out on me? Best regards, Hal. I just wanted to mention, this is just opinion. This is not fact. It's not evidence. Where it says just wanted to check, didn't I send you a package of UFO Mag articles on down to where it says specifically ever heard of Zodiac? I kind of think that this is an anomalous paragraph. I don't see really what it has to do with the rest of the vibe of the rest of the email here. It just seems like something that doesn't really seem like it has enough gravity to be included in this kind of serious alleged document, but that's just my opinion. Did you have anything else, Frank, aside from the other stuff that we were able to do research on?
Yeah, that really the next thing that I would want to go to is the Edgar Mitchell letter. And that is now supposedly all these documents came from the Edgar Mitchell collection. And the reason people are jumping to that conclusion is because there is a letter addressed to Edgar Mitchell in the collection. And that is coming up. Where is this?
Okay.
I got to go back. There it is. From, of course, Mitchell was a member of NIDS, and he gets this letter supposedly from Bob Bigelow. So I don't think that's necessarily proved just because somebody has Dr. Mitchell's address and puts at the top of the letter, Dear Mr. Mitchell. Again, I don't think that necessarily proves. There's a lot of cutting and pasting going on. Somebody might have gotten a letter to somebody different within NIDS and decided to pop Edgar Mitchell's name in there just to make the letter a little bit, or the entire document cache a little bit more credible. Even if this letter is legitimate, I don't think that necessarily proves that the Admiral Wilson document is legitimate. Again, I think we've brought up plenty of information to the effect that it is not. But there is an odd paragraph, and Keith Basterfield is also working on this. Mentioned this in his I don't know if his most recent article or the one before that, but at the bottom of the second page of the Mitchell document, enclosed is a copy of an article provided to us by your colleague, SAB member Edgar Mitchell. Keith suggests that this is the kind of letter, and I think we've got that confirmed, that this is the kind of letter that went out to NIDS members in general, so that Edgar Mitchell gets mentioned and then he also gets addressed at the top of the letter isn't necessarily that unusual. It could be some kind of, just a mail merge, and he happened to be mentioned in the body of the letter, and he's also getting a copy of the letter. Not necessarily that big a deal. But again, it's also quite possible that, this is a legitimate letter, but that was not addressed to Edgar Mitchell. It was addressed to somebody else, and somebody's popping his name in there just to give the entire document cache a little bit more credibility. They're leaning on this hard, and they're working the wrong end of the problem. They're working it back from the release back to, they're working the problem that way, and I don't know that they're ever going to get to the person who actually created this material and packaged this material together.
Right.
And also, I think it's quite possible that this letter is perfectly legitimate, and that the individual who put it out there and distributed it to a couple of different researchers may well have gotten this, and may well have gotten the other documents, the autopsy and the Wilson document separately. We just don't know. But when you look at the cache in its entirety, even this, even this Mitchell letter, I wouldn't say is 100%, but there's no real wild information in there, nothing too extraordinary. So I wouldn't question this one too hard. But again, even if and I don't think that's proven either, even if the Wilson document did pass through Edgar Mitchell's hands, doesn't necessarily make it legitimate, or even it's nothing. The fact that he had it doesn't mean anything, if he in fact had it. And again, that has not been demonstrated at all. So,
well, okay. That's
the side that they're working on. So that's where they're at. And again, they really haven't come up with much of anything, to be honest with you.
What I did was I contacted somebody from NIDS who had been a member of the organization since its inception. And he had a few things to say about that document that you just talked about. And he said, I recognize the documents. Basically, they were to announce NIDS SAB meetings and were individualized for each member. Don't mean very much. The reference to me on page 2 had to do with investigation of Corso and his background. The results are covered in my UFO book in my chapter on him. That's what he said.
Mm-hmm.
And he basically was also saying, well, he said more, but I'll leave it at that. One thing I would like to say, though, is this. I have yet to see evidence that the alien autopsy memo and the smoking gun doc, these alleged documents, ever came out of the Edgar Mitchell estate or his files, for that matter.
And
There is none.
Even if that does prove to be the case, again, it doesn't make the
now.
hang on, let me finish. It doesn't make the Wilson doc legit. That's all.
Now, what I'd like to say about that also is, let's pretend they did. That does not mean that they were real.
Yeah. Even
what
if
it does mean,
yeah.
what it does mean to me is that somebody had direct access to Edgar Mitchell's files to be able to stitch together the Commander Miller letter that he allegedly wrote to Eric Davis in the smoking gun document. Now, Commander Miller has already indicated to me when I interviewed him, and Frank, he also spoke to Frank as well, separately, that he believes that letter is not only stitched together in some parts, but that it is fake, because he did not write that letter, meaning in its entirety. He did not write it. And it's really important that people understand that. One thing I've noticed in the UFO community going on regarding these documents is, once somebody does research on these documents and they get actual information, evidence, or something that might be close to proof regarding these two sets of alleged documents, and it doesn't fit their belief system, they become extremely hateful and irate.
Yeah.
And then they start to cherry pick what they believe. Hold on. Then they start to cherry pick what they believe to be correct. And I'd like to tell them this. If you have not asked every single person in the alien autopsy memo and the smoking gun document, whether their part is true, then there is no way anybody can say that these documents are solid or authentic as they stand now. It's just basic research 101. Period.
Pretty much. Well, Stanton Friedman believed at least some of the Majestic 12 documents were legitimate. Right up, I guess, till he passed away back in May. It's going to happen. People are going to believe certain aspects of the UFO phenomena, especially these docs. And there's really not a very long track record of any kind of leaked documents really bearing any fruit, really being legitimate. The only one that I can honestly even think of was the Mellon doc that leaked last year, when apparently he left a page at his website available, and Twitter J got a hold of it. We talked about that in some detail. But that's about where it's at now. Let's see the pro doc people. Like I said, don't misrepresent what we've done here. Don't try to come off and say we don't know what we're talking about. Absolutely. I think we've demonstrated that we do know at least a little bit about what we're talking about. We're raising some serious, legitimate questions. And, here we go. Come up with some evidence. Put Wilson in Vegas and get back to me at that point. Put Wilson in Vegas. Can you do that? You can try. Are you trying? Again, when we had Melinda Leslie on the other night, have you looked at known samples of Eric Davis's writing and looked for similarities between that and the notes? Have you even tried to do that? Again, it wouldn't be proof, but at least it would be some evidence. Come up with some evidence besides the documents themselves that the documents are legitimate, and you have not done that. So,
right.
What do you? I don't know. Do you have anything else?
I do, and I want to go ahead and address somebody that has asked me a question. I think I can't remember. It was like a couple weeks ago, something like that. And he had asked me for direct quotes, which I will provide in another show. Yes, you can hold me to that regarding what Commander Miller told me. And no, I have not actually changed anything I have said regarding what he has said. I have been very general regarding what he said because I cannot give direct quotes without having my transcript in front of me. And I'm waiting to do that because I have already spoken to him again, and I plan on giving that other transcript in the same show. So if you feel like you can compare everything I've said and parallel it one right after the other and show me where the differences are, I would like to see that, because I've been very careful regarding what I've said. And I can tell you that Commander Miller did absolutely say that the letter is fake. He never wrote it. There may be parts that he could have written. The rest did not write. But the letter in its entirety was fake. He did not write it from beginning to end. And I did talk to him for a second time about that. And we went over it not only again, but we went over other topics that cover different subjects that Frank and I have not talked about. So what you're saying is we're absolutely incorrect, and I'm just letting that individual know that now. Again, I'd be more than happy to see a transcript of what I've said a few times, and I'd like to read the differences between it, because I have not changed what I've said at all. It remains the same regarding Commander Miller.
So there we go. Okay, let's wrap this up. I think an hour is pretty good. It's a pretty good, solid update. And let me say, in summation, that the leak of the century is not this Wilson document. The leak of the century is the one I took in my pants when I listened to the pro-doc people try to claim that this stuff is legit from laughing so hard. So
well,
there.
Look,
and you can quote me on that.
Yeah, can we? Yeah, we're going to have to go and get a transcript of that. One thing I wanted to say here is the motive appears to be disinformation here, as well as discrediting lots of people. Now, one thing I'd like to mention is this set of documents, the alien autopsy memo and also the smoking gun memo, were designed as a game. The game basically is this: it was made to break up friendships, to cause controversy, to create discussion, to create disinformation, to cause people to blindly believe something. In other words, the documents don't actually make anybody do anything. It's the people that do it. But if it can somehow promote that possibility, that is part of the design of the game. So basically all we're looking at here is a game that was designed to have circular discussions, so we can get petty about things like, oh, well, you're not providing the exact quotes from somebody. Oh, well, you're not providing this. Oh, well, you're just saying that. Basically, the narrative going on in the UFO community is a bunch of petty stuff that doesn't matter.
Yeah, and they're providing nothing. They're providing nothing.
At the same time, it provides nothing. Another thing I've noticed that this document does is it causes people to think that there's something big afoot, like there's something great that's going to happen. This is a form of disclosure that it's basically something that we all need to look at as the documents of the century. Frank, have you seen any part of this that smacks of being documents of the century to you?
No. Disinfo of the century.
I would
Since
say
the MJ12 docs, I think, came out in the last century. So yeah, this is the disinfo of the century.
I think the easiest course of action, if there were to be one, is to blatantly dismiss them as bogus, which is what they have proven to be so far, and move on. You know why? Because there's real news going on out there.
Yeah.
For once, UFOs, UAPs, whatever you want to call them, are now mainstream news.
Yep.
That's more important. The logical motive. What is basically, what do you think is a logical motive in this series of documents here? What do you think they're designed to be, Frank? What is your opinion on
A
that?
distraction.
Right, but see, I'm glad you said that. A distraction from what?
Well, yeah, I mean, let's face it. We really probably should be talking about episode 4 of the Unidentified show, which came on Friday night. It was fantastic. We probably should be talking about that, to tell you the truth.
And we will be, because
yeah.
On July 7th, we are going to have a mega panel of really well-known guests that everybody loves to be able to talk about all of the episodes. Oh, the last one is on July 5th. And July 7th, which is a Sunday at noon, we have many people from all over the world who are really well known in the world of ufology, who are dying to talk about these wonderful shows, to say whether they like them or they don't. We have 2 movie directors who are going to be on that show, and they're hilarious. And they just, you know what? I think one of them actually doesn't like the shows at all. And so we don't want people who like the shows on that day. We want people who do and do not like them. It's going to be a really lively discussion.
Yeah, absolutely. And one last thing about disinformation. Now, this researcher who's been trumpeting these docs as the leak of the century and so on and so forth has called a lot of different things disinformation during the last year and change. He called the use of the word metamaterials disinformation. Well, all it was is some very odd materials, and they were struggling to find the right name for it, and they latched onto metamaterials, and that's the name that sort of stuck. And Gary Nolan sort of updated that and said, well, maybe ultra materials is better. So they're struggling to find a name for these different alloys, these different materials that they can't figure out where they were manufactured. Okay, so that's not disinformation. That's struggling with language, struggling to find the right words to describe something. And he's also claimed that the use of the word or the acronym UAP as compared to UFO is also disinformation. But now here's some disinformation staring him right in the face. And if it was a snake, it would have bit him. So there you go.
You know what I find so funny is also... it's interesting. A long time ago, I actually had the unfortunate situation occur of a friend of mine who fell for a group of people that were very cult-like regarding their behavior about religion. And it was very sad to see because, oh, by the way, Frank, can you just look in the chat there?
Yeah, no problem.
Thank you.
I got it.
But what I was going to say is this person got caught up in this group, and they literally gave all of their possessions away. They became programmed, and they just became mesmerized by the folks running the group. And they basically did everything just about what the leaders asked that person to do. And this group is known worldwide. And my understanding is that my friend is not involved with that organization anymore. But see, that's the thing. These documents are bringing that kind of reaction out of people. Or after we have done all of our due diligence and we've contacted 2 people in these docs. Let's make this clear. Mm-hmm. 2 people. One in the Smoking Gun doc, which is Commander Miller. We've also contacted a second individual who has been allegedly involved in the Smoking Gun doc and the alien autopsy memo, and wanted to make it clear that these people have nothing to do with these docs. Both have said that these are fake docs, and they have no idea anything about them, that they don't understand them. They make no sense of them. They've never even seen them before. Yep. And so where I'm going with this is people do not have the right to say to others, you must believe these docs. These docs are real. Why? Because Frank and I just did our research to prove that 2 people are saying they are not a part of these docs. But you know what I'm finding? That's not good enough for these people.
And another thing, all right, get to the point, please.
Well, that is part of the point. The rest of the point is there was a person we just interviewed on our show who was very colorful and lively about how she had to defend her topic. And she and I had a circular discussion, which I found very interesting. And that was, she said, because these people, she's talking about certain people allegedly involved in these stalks, were under certain top secret programs and involved in classified programs, that they had to basically, my understanding, my perception of what she said is, basically lie, I guess, in order to say that they were not a part of it when they really were. I'm going to have to ask her about that.
Okay. And now let me jump in here and make a point. That's why if you're dealing with somebody in that kind of a position, that's why you ask them the type of questions where you know they can answer. That's why I asked Commander Miller, what did he think about the Socorro case? You know what I'm saying? He can answer a question like that. It's somebody who's interested in UFOs, and that's his opinion. There's no NDA or security clearance involved in that. And when he said, "What is it? Can you tell me a little bit about it?" That was that's what convinced me that Wilson document was fake. And then obviously everything that we found following up with it is in fact pointing in that direction, as far as I'm concerned. So yeah, let's kind of wrap this up, though, Chant.
We will. I wanted to bring one last thing up, and that is this person we just interviewed. She said something very interesting, and I would like to mention it.
Well, it's Melinda Leslie. You can say it.
Right. She said that I believe somebody that would be in a situation maybe of classified nature, that kind of professional background, told her, if anything this is how they said it, if anything in the document, even one sentence refers to something classified, we cannot comment in any way on the whole entire document. If there's one sentence there, we can't comment on it.
And again, that's why when you're a good researcher, you don't ask them about the document. You ask them, was Admiral Wilson in Vegas on such and such a date? You know what I'm saying? You do research about that. You ask them about, hey, do you know anything about this case? You ask these folks about things that they can answer and that you know that they can answer and that you would expect an honest answer. And I have no reason to think that we haven't gotten honest answers on those questions.
And I also asked
That's what good researchers do.
Right. Going along what she said regarding the no comment part, again, I want to read that because it's important regarding what she said. It's very important. She said, if anything in the document, even one sentence refers to something classified, we cannot comment in any way on the whole entire document. If there's one sentence there, we can't comment on it. Then I brought this to her attention. Evidently, Dr. Mitchell had been interviewed by somebody, and he said, now this won't make sense because in the context of it, he's referring to something else, so I'll just start reading what he said, but you'll understand the end of it, how it's related. The UFO program and this is Dr. Mitchell talking, the UFO program that the Admiral sought would be in this category. Thus, by law, he would be required to deny the existence of such a program. For a core secret SAP, even a no comment would be a breach of security. Now, my points are these. There are two people, to my knowledge, that have made no comments about these, at least one of the documents, meaning the alien autopsy document. Going along this kind of logic or thought process that Melinda Leslie said and allegedly Dr. Mitchell said here, even a no comment would be a breach of security. Did these two people not then just create a breach of security by making a no comment? Do you see how that's a circular discussion right there? Yeah. The other thing I wanted to mention is I told her repeatedly that it is not fair to say that John Alexander has, or anybody for that matter, especially if they have not been contacted, to say that they have had a part to play in either one of these documents, because she does not have the right to represent them as she's not their official spokesperson, for one, and they have the right to defend themselves. So none of us have the right to actually say that these people who are allegedly involved in these documents, that they're involved when they are saying they are not. And even those who have not said anything, they still need to be protected in their own way. It's the moral and ethical thing to do.
Okay. All right. Now, can we go home now?
Yep, I'm
All right.
good to go.
Okay. Now, all right, so we're done. We're going to be back our Wednesday night with Deep Prasad. We're going to talk about metamaterials and some really good stuff, so that's going to be great.
Wonderful. I look forward to that.
Yep, so do I. And as far as I know, so does Deep.
There is one thing I want to mention. You just mentioned Deep. He's a really wonderful person. I've spoken to him twice, and he has had some really amazing stories that he wants to share with folks. And
it's going to be a lot of fun. So let's.
We do have a lot to talk about with him. And now I did have to get your opinion on one thing, Frank. There is somebody in the chat that is saying, what about Jeremy Corbell saying he is in a position to know the EWD Wilson doc is real? Okay, you know what I have to tell you? I'll tell you what I have to say, and that is this. We just did our research. Why don't you do yours instead of just believing people blindly? It's important to do that. The research that we came up with is that two people involved in two different documents are plainly stating that these documents are fake. They have not played any part in it. And I can guarantee you that Jeremy Corbell did not contact either one of them.
Yeah, and just to address that, the pro-docs folks aren't doing anything more really than expressing an opinion. That's really the bottom line. They're digging into the provenance. So basically they're working from, where the docs are today backwards. And they found the roads may or may not lead to Edgar Mitchell. And even if they do, it doesn't matter. They're not looking at the docs themselves. Chant, look, let's wrap this up. It's 11 o'clock here in the East, so we'll talk again before we interview Deep on Wednesday. Thanks for tuning in, everybody, and have a good night.
Good
Bye-bye
night.
now.